Hello, everybody. Welcome to our rain garden workshop. Great to see all of you this evening. As you are joining us, please feel free to write in the chat where you're joining us from and maybe what you're hoping to learn tonight. We'd love to hear from you. We're going to get started here in just a minute. We'll give people about 60 seconds or so to join us. Like we've got 15 folks in here so far. Great to see all of you this evening. All right. Well, hey, why don't we go ahead and get started? It is 6 o'clock. My name is Amy Barton, and I'm the Communications and Program Stewardship Manager at the Clackamas River Basin Council. I've been with the council since late 2001, and we are very excited to offer this rain garden workshop tonight. I'm joined by fellow staff member Dakota Hufford, who will be helping out on the back end, and our lovely presenter, Laura Price from Design with Nature.
Hi, everyone.
All right, welcome, Meryl. Yes, good to see you. Okay, let's move on to our next slide if we're ready, Laura. Thank you. Many of us are joining this call tonight from Oregon and Washington, and I'd like to take a moment to recognize that we are gathered on the unceded land of many Native peoples. So I ask you tonight to join me in acknowledging the many communities, their elders, both past and present, as well as future generations. This acknowledgement demonstrates a commitment to beginning the process of working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism. We thank those who came before us for their stewardship of these lands and waters, and those who continue to steward them now and into the future. Thank you. Next slide, please, Laura. All right, so on to our workshop plan for the evening. We are going to dive right into ways that you can manage your rainwater at home and talk about rain garden function. Then at about halftime, we're going to take a 5-minute break.
Do you want to listen to this at all? It's about making a rain garden and water stuff.
Followed by a Q&A. If you wouldn't mind putting yourself on mute, that would be wonderful. Thank you so much. After our Q&A, we're going to talk about ways that we can conserve water and protect water quality at home. And then finally, we're going to end with another Q&A for Laura and for myself as well. So a couple of quick reminders, if you could please keep your microphones on mute, that would be wonderful. If you could also please pop your questions as we go along into the chat, that would be wonderful. I will compile all of your questions and have them ready for Laura during the Q&A. But if you have a clarifier question about something Laura just shared, I may come off mute and ask Laura your question just to get that answered for you before we move on. You're also welcome to leave your cameras off. This will help decrease our bandwidth for our speaker and decrease the carbon footprint of our meeting tonight. And also, as a reminder, this session is being recorded. Thank you.
Next.
Yes, please. Yes, so the Clackamas River Basin Council is a nonprofit watershed council. Our mission is to foster partnerships for clean water, to improve fish and wildlife habitat, and enhance the quality of life for those who live, work, and recreate in the Clackamas River Basin. We are a 501c3 nonprofit, and for over 20 years, we've been invested in restoring and protecting the Clackamas River and its tributaries. We do this through many ways. We have in-stream and riparian restoration projects. The photo on the left shows CRBC contractors installing large wood in a stream for fish habitat. We also host volunteer events and educational workshops such as this, all free to the public. The image in the middle there shows our Down the River cleanup, where volunteers help us clean a 22-mile stretch of the Clackamas River to protect water quality. You're all invited to attend this September 10th. We also offer streamside residents with free weed removal and native tree and shrub planting through our Shade Our Streams program, and we help residents with wildfire recovery. The image on the right is a freshly planted baby tree after the 2020 September wildfires. We do this great work, but I just want to stress that we really can't do it without people like you. All the things that you do in your daily lives really, truly do make a difference. So thanks for being here tonight. Next slide, please. Thank you. So one of the reasons that we wanted to host this specific workshop is to address some of the issues facing our urban streams. You'll learn a lot more tonight from our speaker, Laura, about how your potential future rain garden will not only look stunning, but also protects our rivers and streams. Even if you're not on a creek or a river, your rainwater from your home or business likely still makes its way into a waterway, carrying with it all the pollutants and chemicals it picks up along the way. The Clackamas River provides drinking water for over 300,000 Oregonians. That's 10% of the state. The image on the right shows the areas that get their water from the Clackamas River. The Clackamas River also provides habitat for threatened and endangered salmon and steelhead, and it's home to a host of other wildlife, including all the little guys on this slide here. So I want to really thank you for joining us this evening and learning more about which rainwater management system is best for your yard. You're all doing the right thing, so thank you so much. Next slide, please. I also want to thank our sponsors for making this workshop possible: the Clackamas River Water Providers, Clackamas Water Environment Services, Portland General Electric, Oak Lodge Water Services, and the City of Oregon City. Thank you so much for your support. We wouldn't be here without you. All right, next slide, please. Thank you. All right, without further ado, everybody, let me introduce to you Laura Price. She is the owner of Design with Nature. She's an ecological landscape designer and garden coach and educator. She combines her background in landscape architecture, organic horticulture, and permaculture to create sustainable residential yards that enhance outdoor living and are drought tolerant, beautiful, and low maintenance. As a backyard habitat certified designer, she brings deep experience with native plants and focus to building healthy soils, managing rain runoff, and enhancing wildlife habitat. So you are all in very good hands tonight. I hope that you have lots of great questions for Laura. And like I said, I will be compiling those. So if you want to pop them into the chat, we'll go over them after our break at halftime. All right, Laura, please take it away.
Well, thank you, Amy. That was wonderful. I'll also appreciate the hearing myself the background of all that you do with the Clackamas River Basin Council. So here we are, and this is actually the first of 2 workshops that we're providing, and we'll tell you more about the second. But this first one, yes, there is a big interest in water or rain gardens, and here you can see a couple of them at home residences, and it's nice to just see also how they can vary, whether they're on a slope or flat, shady, sunny, etc. But today's we're going to spend a good amount of time looking at giving an overview to you about all of the ways that you can manage rainwater at your home, because while a rain garden is really a great feature, not everybody has the room, or maybe doesn't have a sufficiently flat property to do it. And so, and there's, I would say, just a plethora of ways to get that water in the ground. So we'll be covering kind of a broad umbrella of strategies here. And I like to start with this little diagram of a natural setting and what the water cycle is like in a forested setting. So you see these little percentages in the diagram on the left. And you can see that it's, it's somewhat wooded or forested, and with that kind of undeveloped land, of all the rainfall that comes down, a good, 37% or so is brought up through the trees and back into the air through evapotranspiration. The other rainfall that falls is a lot of it gets held in what is called an interflow layer right here. It would be, you might know it as, say, a duff layer in the forest where all the leaves and needles fall, every year and create this very organic surface layer that smells, humsy and wonderful. So that acts like a sponge and holds about 25% of the rainfall there. So, and what that allows it to do is perk down slowly into the groundwater. And of all of that, the groundwater is, taking about 36 or more percent. So the key little percentage here is, look at the surface runoff down next to the river. It's like 0.3 of 1% that is surface runoff. And, so all of this is, if we had that kind of environment, our streams would be, happy and healthy. But of course, we're in a metro area, and we have increasing over time, more and more impervious surfaces that increase the surface runoff, because it can't seep into the ground. It has to flow somewhere. So it might be in suburban density type neighborhood around 55%. But if you got into the inner city, it's as high as 75 or 90%. That could be all the impervious surfaces. So that's our big challenge, is with the land that we have that isn't impervious, how can we take all the rainfall we have and get it to be absorbed, into the soil, into the ground, and replenishing our groundwater. So also what's, the impacts of all that runoff is it's flowing from our streets and driveways and rooftops, and there's all manner of our of materials and that end up in that water. And we have, from that extra runoff or increased runoff, there's more flooding in our urban areas. I first moved here in the early 1990s and saw some big storms that flooded out a lot of land in East Multnomah County and into parks, and it actually was up over the wall downtown. So, and with that flooding, you get a lot of soil erosion coming with it, and sediment going down the river and losing some good soil and some good stream side, vegetation that is there to shade the streams. So water quality pollution it's a big deal. It's a big challenge. And all of those factors together basically degrade our streams and salmon habitat. So with that, this is our big message, it's managing rainwater at your home really matters, especially cumulatively. We can all walk our talk and make a big difference. And it all comes down to, however you do it, you're slowing and sinking that rainwater into the ground. And by foregoing chemical yard products, that is how we can contribute to the health of the streams, and especially for salmon, but also for people. Clackamas is your drinking water. So we can make a big impact in a positive direction. Not to be redundant, but I think it's key to note that it's sort of a cumulative effect of degradation. So when we can replenish that groundwater in the ground, rather than having it all run into the streams with all matter of chemicals and such in it, we're replenishing that groundwater supply, and that's what our streams rely on through those increasingly warm summer months and dry summer months that we have. So that helps keep them cool. And the soil and the plants and the microbes themselves actually are a very effective cleaning or breaking down of the compounds that are the toxins. And I've seen some really interesting studies, actually live camera research done by Salmon Safe, where they built a whole compost kind of pathway for a runoff from a road before that to go through before it hit the stream. And the difference in terms of the toxins that were reduced was pretty impressive. So let's talk about the different ways to manage rainwater, and the rain garden is one of them. So just in this front photo alone, we can see that, well, I know because this is one of the yards that I've worked on. There was a good bit of compost, first of all, blended into the soil overall. So we have, with that organic matter, compost builds that spongy, it acts like a sponge. When the rain comes down, it really gets absorbed by all the compost. And on top of the compost is a couple inch layer of mulch, which is doing the same thing. So all of that helps the water absorb. It holds it and retains it a little longer after rain or into the summer, and because it's all getting down into deeper into the ground. And in the background, we've put in, you see it's white because it's a little gravel rain garden that's collecting off the roof. You can, if you look closely, see the downspout. All natives that will fill in and make that pretty dense, and we could probably add more ground covers as well. And last but not least, we have a bark chip path for walkways that are also very absorbent. So increasingly, I'm really happy to see with the research that's out there and the people that are writing, and what we're learning is it really does come down to the soil in a big, big way. So even if you don't build a rain garden or can't build a rain garden, you can do so much just by amending the soil, as I just described, to build that soil sponge is what we call it. In fact, I took a workshop with a woman who works in Los Angeles, and she, believe it or not, can treat a yard as if it's a wetland, not a wetland. That was I meant to say something else, but essentially she creates the yard through soil amendment that it can absorb and take the rainfall from off the roof and of the limited rain that they have, and grow a garden that doesn't need to be irrigated in LA. So the effectiveness of how you work with your soil is a big part of changing your yard. So the other thing you can do is remove some lawn areas by sheet mulching, and we'll get into this in a little bit, but just a few facts. In our country, that we have close to 50 million acres of lawn, and the water that those lawns use, they've calculated that it uses more water than all the top 7 of our agricultural crops, which is kind of blows my mind. That's a lot of water use, and lawns are high input, low output in terms of benefits. You know, they don't do a good job of taking up water. They don't have deep roots. They don't have a diverse, plants that provide habitat value. There's a lot of maintenance to them, and most people, or too many people, I should say, hopefully it's changing, are, believe in the kind of the weed and feed method of maintenance. So it's a first priority to really seriously look at your lawns and see if there's a better use, or how much do you really need. And I've kind of mentioned this, but just a density of more trees and shrubs, especially if you're on slopes, because they provide deeper root systems that prevent erosion and do, just as I mentioned with the how much take up a tree can take. They're from that first diagram that I showed you, they do a really effective job of taking up the rainfall that falls on the ground. So plant trees if you can. Of course, the habitat value of this is very, very high to have something as large of a tree in your yard if you can manage that. So these are kind of just a couple of statistics here. So even a small tree that has a 25-foot wide canopy can take up over 1,500 gallons from a 1-inch rainfall. So that's quite a bit right there. Portland is actually evaluated how much take up from rainstorms and surface runoff from just the street and park trees alone. And they figured that they take up 3 million gallons per 1-inch rainfall in the city, or cumulatively 135 million gallons over the year. So, you know, urban forestry in a treed city this is just another benefit to capturing our rain and using it for good instead of having it be a problem. So I just wanted to show a few native shrubs here. These ones in particular that I've selected, you'd find them in nature in riparian areas or maybe floodplains. So they like wet, and some of them, like the Douglas spirea, we see it in our wetlands naturally. And that means in our wetlands that they're even used to being, you know, their roots underwater for a period of time. But like all our Oregon natives, they here in the Willamette Valley, you know, they're used to the 2-season climate that we have, where it can be 8 months of rain and 4 months of hot and dry. So they can go dry in the summer and be drought tolerant, and at the same time be absorbing and thriving in the rain in the wintertime. So some of if you have any wet areas, or say bottom of a slope maybe on your property, or are near a stream, you can use these. And these are great plants to put around your rain garden as well. Hopefully you can read them. We have a swamp rose. We have other wild roses as well, but this one loves wet the most. The red osier dogwood, sometimes called red twig dogwood, Douglas spirea. Dayleaf rush. We have many species of rush and also sedges. They're kind of the pair of grasses that we see in our wetlands. We use them in the bottom of our rain gardens because they are used to being wet, having the roots underwater for a period of time. And then 9-bark up in the upper right. So you saw in that one photo, the aerial of, you know, new developments, and we were hard pressed to see much green in between those homes and between sidewalks and streets. There's not many places for that runoff to get into the soil. So, you know, we encourage you to look at, do you have pavement that, you know, especially in this one example, it's old and maybe needs to be, well, maybe it's not even needed. In this case, this was a old driveway that wasn't used, and they actually
6:23 p.m.
did a depave project and to remove it and gain more garden space. And so you can see of the examples here, we have, fortunately, the industry has really come a long ways in the last 15 or so years. So we have all manner of design of pervious concrete pavers, which you can see on the bottom left, where they're designed with those little spaces as they fit together, where the rainfall can be absorbed beneath. You also see an example in the center bottom. This is grass block pavers. And people like those when they really maybe have a situation where it's an overflow, they're not using it as their main driveway, but they want that that structure of the paving, but it can, once that grass grows, it can be looking very green at the same time. And then on the right, we actually have permeable concrete. I don't know if any of you have seen that before. It looks a lot like, well, it is concrete. It looks a lot like I would say a rice cake or a Rice Krispie bar. And as you can see from the little picture up above, the water does flow right through it into the ground. So with all of these paving materials, that makes a big difference. In fact, most newer development, I think it's become, I'm happy to see, very mainstream. You don't see too many people putting in asphalt driveways anymore. And as we think at other pathways and circulation, you know, this is more for walking, not for your car or vehicles. But even so, with that, these are all pervious in that the rain can get absorbed into the ground. And we see some flagstone, step stones with a little gravel in between. This in the center, that is a pea gravel, which tends to be round. It doesn't compact, so it drains nicely, but it also needs a good little edge to hold it in place, like you see in the center photo. And on the upper right, this is what we call a quarter minus gravel. So it unlike the pea gravel, it's not round, it's angular, and it has fines within it. So they all get compacted. So if you need a harder path, but also one that still is pervious, that might be a choice you choose. I know I used to work for parks agencies for 20 years, and those quarter minus gravel paths they actually meet the ADA standards for a wheelchair. And on the bottom, we see this is just broken up concrete, recycled as a flagstone. I'll tell you, concrete is like the biggest waste material in the world, the volume of it. I don't have the fact at the tip of my tongue, but I think this is just a wonderful repurposing of old concrete. And maybe you have a situation where you want to take out some concrete or bust up an old concrete patio. You can put a path down like that for pennies on the dollar that you would pay for a flagstone patio. So then we look at other, even more soft paths. We see the bark chips up on top. And by the way, that's some fringe cup up on top on the left, I should say. And below that is a bark chip path, probably from arbor chips. You know, they are available almost virtually free to be laying down paths in your yard or for sheet mulching. The center is just a couple examples of how you can have a ground cover, but with just steppers through it. And on the right, we can see in some cases, and this reminds me more of English gardens, but maybe the only lawn you have is your pathway through your gardens, which is another option. So we talked about the removing any impervious surfaces. And of course, our house and our garage and our driveway are more than likely, or at least the house and the garage, the roof, is going to be one of the larger impervious surfaces on our property. So where can we direct that rainwater to where it can be absorbed? And this is where the rain garden comes in. We're seeing a rain garden example on the left and a swale on the right. So in both these cases, there's a downspout that is feeding into them, and it can be both an underground pipe that goes right from the downspout into the garden. So, you know, which comes in handy just in terms of circulation, that you have it underground. Or you might want to make a feature of it, like a dry, a dry riverbed, so to speak, that this swale is mimicking here with the different size stones. But again, in both these cases, we're sending water there, and instead of running down quickly down the street or into the catch basin from the for the ones that are hooked up, to the municipal systems, we're slowing it and sinking it on the property. And that is, it takes a lot of, what shall I say, just taking all that volume out of the municipal system is really helpful, especially when sometimes in the winter they overflow or they reach capacity. But it's also you're getting that water down deeper into the ground, in your home garden, which was good for you. So this is just to sort of break down how that rain garden functions. It's a sunken garden bed, but look, it's not that deep. It's the ponding depth here is 6 inches. It can be up to between 6 inches and a foot. You can see underneath that depth, we see some amended soil, and that is just where we've blended the soil with compost for the plants that we're going to plant in the garden. But, this is the roof water is coming in from the downspout, and this is just schematic. So, in real life, it wouldn't look like that. The size of the garden is sized to receive the amount of water you expect to go in to it. So, that will be some
6:31 p.m.
details that actually will be covered in a month when we focus the rain garden presentation on the planning, designing, and building of a rain garden. So we'll get into right down into the nitty gritty of it all. But the other important piece to this little diagram is that you always want to think about an overflow. If we have the Pineapple Express and several days of rain, we're trying to size them so that they really do take all the rain, but there might be a rare occasion where it overflows, and that is planned for so that when it overflows, maybe it spreads out into a lawn or a place where it's okay, not on a neighbor's property or some place. Certainly, the biggest consideration is we want all the water to be flowing away from the foundation of your home. And we put plants in the rain garden. It may not always need to be chock full of plants, but of course they're helping too, because all those roots help the water further absorb. They're taking up that rainwater like we've talked about, transpiration, and the soil and those plants and the microbes that are in the soil around the plants all serve to break down any pollutants that are in that water. And of course, what you're also doing is creating habitat for our wildlife. And this is just a few more examples to show you how different in character there can be. Obviously the one in the upper right is a sunny front yard, and they can have those perennials in there. Hopefully they have something that is there through the winter as well. And here is the one on the upper right. Is this property had just tremendous, what shall I say, the percolation into the ground was really fast. We knew it had a very good capacity for soaking up the rain. So, and the client wanted it to look like a pond, and so we stuck with the cobbles and just the rushes that will, over time, of course, they spread and fill in a little bit more too. We can see this is a brand new installed one on the lower right, and not the same one on the lower left. But what I like about the one on the lower left is, if you wish, you can have a rain garden be completely blended with the rest of your landscape. It's very discreet. It's doing a really important job, but passersby may not even, they'll just see it as a garden and not even know that it's a rain garden. And I'll just mention this, and as I say, this is where we'll get down into the details in a month from now. But the main things you want to consider, if you're interested in putting a rain garden in your yard to send all of the water from your roof to, is ideally you should have slopes that are 10% or under. Not to say it can't be over, but it gets a little more, as you have a steeper slope, obviously, water wants to find a level, and that means you're essentially building a dam on the lower side. And so we feel that, for the average homeowner, 10% is a nice number to stay under that percentage. And we want to make sure that soils actually percolate sufficiently. You could be living somewhere, you would probably know it, if the water just seems to sit and not soak in after it rains. So we do a perk test for that, and I won't get into the details now. And then, of course, rain garden placement. We establish, as you can see down in the bottom photo, setbacks. The most important one is the setback from the house, especially if you have a basement. And that could be 6 to 10 feet. And just for, safety, we like to keep a setback from driveways and sidewalks as well. And certainly you wouldn't be doing a rain garden within the root system of a tree or under, where your utility lines are. So it's just little things to think about for sure. And then finally, once you calculate the square foot area of the area of roof that is going down a particular downspout, not the whole roof. What matters is how much water is going through each downspout. And that lets you know how big your rain garden should be to accommodate that. And we have a simple rule of thumb of 10%. So if you had an area of your roof that was 500 feet, that was coming out of that one downspout, then it would be, let's see if I'm right, 50 feet. Is that right? Yes. It's 50 square feet. So a 5 by 10 area of a rain garden. Now that's just a rule of thumb, and there's ways you can adjust that we get into all kinds of particular situations. So I mentioned bioswales along with rain gardens, and I know that's been a question, like what is the difference? Because really they're very similar in their function and purpose. They do the same thing. They're receiving water, they're slowing the flow of it and allowing it to sink and be absorbed into the ground. The difference between a bioswale and a rain garden mainly is that it tends to be more linear, like a channel. And oftentimes as you can see in this example on the right, alongside the driveway, this bioswale is going downhill, but has these concrete, I'll call it a check dam. You can also do it with natural materials of logs and rocks, where that in itself slows the water and it kind of pools behind it and gets absorbed. So that's one way that a bioswale can work. And ultimately, some of that water continues on flowing down, but that's okay. You're still doing anything that we do that improves the existing conditions is a real benefit. So on the left here, you can see swales that are cut not vertically up and down the hill, but across the slope, like along a contour line. And this is on a big hillside. And I had worked with a property behind Kelly Butte where all the water of Kelly Butte was running down their yard and the house was at the bottom. And so we did carve these, some of them sometimes are called fish scale swales, but just, the water comes down the hill and it gets captured in each of these little swales. And you can see this diagram of the kind of the wet plume effect of the soil beneath. And a hillside could be, really hard to establish plants on, but by doing this, and of course this diagram is a little more, what shall I say? It's not literal. You'd have probably softer, more natural curves of a swale and a berm. But it's a great place to plant your, shrubs or whatever else you might want on that hillside that to receive that water. And this is another strategy you might actually need to use. Not everybody has enough room to create a rain garden or a swale. But, if you have water issues and you want to make sure you're directing it enough away from the house, this is called a dry well. It's, I think one of the products is called flow well system. And you can see from the diagram on the right, it's all underground. Right here is where that the downspout, or the underground pipe from the downspout feeds right into it. And there's a whole area of clean gravel drain rock around it. And it's, the thing with this is it is deeper down into the ground. And so this is another way to capture that flow and get the ground, that water deeper down. We did this at one of the gardens that I designed where we just felt it was a little, we had a rain garden swell, but it was a little too close to the neighbor's property. It's like, what if that does overflow? So we elected to put one of these structures in beneath where their little play structure was going to be. And one more strategy. I know this is ambitious. Not everyone elects to put a green roof on their home, but it is another form of reducing the stormwater runoff that hits, from your roof, and you can have make a garden out of it. And I've seen with the green roofs that I've seen, they really sort of take on the character of a meadow and become a great pollinator garden for that. And this is kind of impressive that they can take about 65% of the water that hits the roof. And with a green roof, it makes the temperatures, beneath the roof cooler. So if you had a garage or a little shed or studio or something like that in your yard, that might be a nice, application. And as I mentioned, it's habitat for birds and pollinators. From this little diagram, you can see that, it's only a couple inches. That is the growing medium. And it tends to be something like perlite and vermiculite, very lightweight. And the plants that are usually planted on a green roof are succulents or sedums. They can go through hot, dry summers. They don't have very deep roots. And so there's a lot of different succulents that can be put on the top of the roof. Most important is that there's a waterproof membrane and between that and the roof. And, you still want to accommodate where the drainage goes from there. And I just want to say that there's a lot of helpful resources. Portland's Bureau of Environmental Services has incentives, and they have great resource booklets, and I'm sure they're not the only one. And they actually, I think they offer a rebate of about $5 per square foot of cost, and they put out the estimate, at least the one I last read, that you can maybe figure it'd be about $12 a square foot otherwise. All right, we are up to a first break, and we'll take 5 minutes and take some time, or if you have questions, I don't know if I've been going through too quickly, but feel free to put questions in the chat box, and we'll take some time to answer your questions when we get back. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you back here at 6 49. And I do have a list of all the questions that that we've received so far. So please feel free to continue to drop your questions in the chat and we'll go over them shortly.
Oh, thank you. My
Okay.
goodness. Yeah.
You bet.
All righty. Bye.
All right. Welcome back, everybody.
I see a lot of questions. Or
Yeah.
what is it?
Yeah, we got some great questions.
Okay.
Okay, let's start off with one that came closer to the beginning. We have a couple questions about composting and using cardboard, things like that. So Jenna asked that their understanding is that using cardboard in your yard is maybe a bad idea. And there's an article shared from Washington State University that talks about that. So I'm wondering if you can kind of elaborate on the use of cardboard to suppress weeds.
Yeah, I'd love to. And this is recent. And I actually listened to a professor at University of Washington who conducted a study on different mulches and sheet mulching. I think we use the term, well, it was a very popular way for, I would say, for 15 years, we were all sheet mulching and using cardboard at the base to basically force the grasses underneath. We're robbing them of light and water, and so they basically decompose. And then above the cardboard is where we have our 8 to 12 inches of leaves and bark mulch and all manner of organic material that would then pretty much compost in place. And this is how we build really good soil. And it was promoted because at that time, a lot of people were rototilling, spraying, killing the grass, and then rototilling, and all of that really disrupted the ecology of the soil and all the microbes in it that are in those first 6-8 inches. So we've gone to no-till, and that was a very popular and common practice. And so thank you, whoever wrote that comment in. The view is changing on that, in that the cardboard is viewed as perhaps a barrier to the soil. Like we rely on a certain air exchange. Soil should be about 50% solid, mineral, and the other 50%, basically 45%, should be airspace and water, and then and then the remainder in organic material. That is sort of if you looked at a pie chart, that would be the makeup of a good soil for soil life and growing plants. So the cardboard is thought to restrict the kind of gas exchange that needs to happen between soil and air. Now, like so many things, I think it's, what shall I say? There's things aren't black and white, good and bad. There may be a case where that little additional barrier might be helpful, and in a case where it isn't needed at all, especially if you pile on the wood chips or bark chips and grass clippings and dry leaves. It's thick enough. It is probably sufficient in itself to kind of smother out the grasses beneath, so that they'll just decompose. So that is the most recent thinking on that. So we need, it's just that we still use the term sheet mulching. We need a new word for that, I guess, because you don't actually always need the cardboard. And there's a lot of fine tuning to that. Like if you, what shall I say? If you do a little scarifying of the surface of the ground first, and I know this because I actually turned a field into a community garden where we needed it to, we wanted it to break down really, really as fast as possible and into the fines of soil. So I was instructed to spread some, like a protein cottonseed meal, or maybe a little thin layer of compost that was high in manure content before putting the cardboard down. And of course, the moisture is a really big part of this, the breakdown and decomposing. So, watering the cardboard or, doing, the ideal is to do it in the fall when you have all the rains working with you, and the leaves and all of that will decompose much quicker with the wetness of our rainy season. So I hope that clarified and answered the question.
Great. Thank you so much, Laura. This question, you may have slightly answered this in your last answer, but Meryl's wondering if compost and mulch or bark chips used in the yard need to be replenished every year. Is that something that, or can it just work for several years, or what's your take on that? And also, is decaying leaf litter from oak and maple trees effective as a mulch standalone?
Yeah, that's good questions, everyone. I find that I think about every other year, and I'm looking at the soil and it looks thin. If it's doing its job and it's decomposing, it's going to get thin. And if you're starting to see more soil and more weeds popping up, then it's probably a good time to put another layer of bark mulch down, or arbor chips, whatever your choice would be there. And then, of course, Xerces has a big campaign. It's like, rake the leaves into the bed. That's another thing you can do. But honestly, I've done that and they don't break down that quickly, especially oak leaves. And that's why some people, I know there's been some myth out there that oak leaves are bad for plants, but really they're some of the best. But one thing, I have a little lawnmower. It is electric or battery. But you have leaves on the, say, if you have some lawn and you have leaves down on the lawn, just run the lawnmower through them and they're chopping them all up into a nice, beautiful mix of greens and browns that will decompose really rapidly. And so you don't have to. It's all about how you might expedite the decomposition from the raw leaf and material to soil or compost. So I guess that would be my recommendation is to either chop up the leaves through a lawnmower, or maybe you put the leaves in the compost, let them decompose, and then bring before putting them on the ground. But the easiest thing is for the leaves that are there is just they might not break down so quickly, but mulch does several things. It's preventing weeds from happening. It most importantly is it's providing that buffer layer from the rains. Like our winter rains can really compact soil. And so if you have mulch on that, it keeps it from getting overly compacted. And, on a hillside, it keeps it from eroding. It also is breaking down and constantly feeding the soil like a slow release fertilizer, the soil microbes, I should say. And it helps with, compaction, say, of just your feet in the garden, to have that little buffer layer of mulch. And also it tends to moderate, the extreme temperatures of really hot or really cold, it gives you that little buffer layer. So that's a lot of benefits. Whether it's what that material is can vary, but you should always, that's one of the main things that you should do on a regular basis, is keep the ground covered with mulch. But I think every other year is about right.
All right. Thank you so much, Laura. And then we've got a few questions specifically about rain garden. So Mary's question relates to my property as well. The question is, what do you do when your yard is above your house, but you want to build a rain garden? Does that make sense for, directing that rainwater from your house into a rain garden that's above your where your house sits?
Yeah, we have done a situation like that. It was at a church property where there were hills that went down to foundation of the church, but we were able to do some grading where like 10 feet away, this was wonderful because we were building a rain garden and we had to put the spoils or the excess soil somewhere. So we actually raised it up along the foundation of the church so that rain that came down would flow away from the church for 10 feet. And then the hill that was coming from the other side, if you can picture it, they both meet and there was almost like a swale that went into the lower rain garden because there was two, one above and one in the front of the church that was much lower. So the key is that, you know, in your case, of course, I don't know your property or how much of a slope you're talking about, or if it's even able to have the grade be, you know, positive drainage away from the house for at least 10 feet. And so it might even mean putting, like in this one picture here, you see these little rocks to the left that create like a very low little retaining wall. And maybe that's how you get the positive drainage away from your foundation. So it can still flow away in and then on that hillside, hoping it's not too steep, you could have it catching the rain in the rain garden before it's flowing down continuously toward your foundation. I know it's hard. I don't know if you can visualize that, but it becomes just, you know, water flows with just 1 or 2%. So all these little fine adjustments of grading, you know, and we know that it's like, well, we've all played at the beach, you know, and making water flow here or there. So have fun with it and see, and just pay really close attention to the grades. And so you're protecting your home, and finding a safe place where you can send that water. And that will be, that's why you know, it really does get down into a lot of nuts and bolts stuff in the actuality. You know, we have that little schematic, but on the ground, there's a lot more considerations. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you for that. And then Meryl had a question if the rain garden examples that we shared are sufficient to meet new building requirements, or do you need a rain garden to be kind of enclosed in concrete?
Oh, no, you don't need them to be enclosed in concrete. And you don't even, well, it might vary from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, but these are highly encouraged and really with these more naturalistic rain gardens, like I say, it's really kind of carving and undulating the earth a certain way to direct water a certain way and hold it. So, you know, there are no permits required for this in Portland. But it's, you know, as we lead you through and building one, we want to, it's easy enough to build. Well, it does take some elbow grease for digging, but I mean, but it is dealing with water, and we build in all the precautions so that we don't have water showing up somewhere where you don't want it.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much. And then we have another question. Someone said that they've got a lot of bedrock in their yard with outcrops and mini bluffs and things like that. So wondering if there's any strategies to create rain gardens or rainwater management systems for shallower soil.
Yeah, that's interesting. With something like that, I wonder if it would end up being just more of a swale system to, you know, have the water running and seeping wherever it can get in. You will want to make sure, do that perk test in your situation to see that it can indeed sink down into the ground. I know that the property that I live in now has a lot of rock. And And there's a big hillside that when I moved in, the water was, it just washed all the commercial mulch that was there when I bought the home right down the hill. But I put on arbor chips really thick, like about 10 inches thick, and there's been no runoff. And actually, I've been here like 3.5 years now, and it's really wonderful to see. I feel like I'm literally building soil where there wasn't soil when I moved here. So I would say that I wouldn't say that you can't do it, but it would take some assessment for sure to see what would be best.
All right, great. Thank you so much. It looks like we're almost done. We have one more. Mary says that the downspouts are directed directly underground into the street drainage system. So can Mary dismantle those downspouts to divert them into a new rain garden?
Exactly. And that's what we'll be giving some really detailed instruction for. It's all about, in Portland had a disconnect your downspout program that goes way back, 20 some years back before they had the big pipe project. And they were encouraging that because in big storms would have overflow that would be combined sewage and stormwater, which was not good. That was going into the river. But, this decade later or more, we've got, the river is cleaner than it was, and they wanted people to get the water in the ground. But there were those unintended consequences where this was before rain gardens were really a thing, and people were there. All that disconnection was too much water around the foundation. So anyway, we go through a visual step-by-step of all of that. And like I say, you can have an underground connection to the rain garden, or you might want a surface connection and really make a kind of an aesthetic feature out of it, like a little dry riverbed leading to the rain garden. But even if you do that, the first 10 feet away from the house are going to be a solid, pipe or a waterproof membrane under the rocks that make sure that the water isn't getting into the ground for the first 10 feet. And just one more thing, whoever asked about the concrete kind of built planters, these are, when these get used, it's often in a very urban setting where you just don't have the space. And they work a little bit differently, but that is an option if people want to go that route as well, like a raised kind of concrete trough in a way, I guess it would be, except that it would look like our green streets, if you're familiar with those that City of Portland has put in. Those are all lined with concrete. And of course, and with those, they do still connect to the municipal system, but they have the benefit of all of the cleaning of the stormwater that the Green Street rain gardens do. And they slow it too, so we kind of reduce that impact of too much all at one time. Okay.
All right, great. I think that's all of our questions for now. So we can go ahead and keep going with the program, and then everyone, please keep your questions coming. This is really fun to have these discussions. So yeah, thank you all.
Yeah, I was looking at this, our cover, our title slide here. This one rain garden on the left, or on the right, excuse me. If you're curious, those are red twig dogwoods. Though it's a cultivated variety where they start with the Cornus sericea is the name, but there are varieties from that straight species native to get these extra features out of them, like this brighter fire color rather than the darker crimson. They still function and, as pretty much like the straight species. There's been some debate out there that all of our insects evolved with our plants, so they recognize and are attracted to our natives, even though they may not be as showy as the ornamental varieties. those are the ones that our insects are drawn to, and all of the caterpillars that feed on these native plants. You know, there's a chemistry that they're used to in these native plants. And of course, we need, if you love birds, you know, we need all those caterpillars to for them to eat and raise their babies on. So this is the red is the dogwood, and behind here, this shrub, you can't really see it close up, but that is a strawberry tree. It's a relative, a cousin of the madrone, arbutus, if you know that name, and it's evergreen, and it's also drought tolerant and has nice flowers and berries that look like strawberries. It's just one of my favorites of the natives to include in a garden design. And of course, you're seeing all the sedges in the bottom of the rain garden, both of them. Uh-oh. There we go.
Your comment, Laura, about the connection between insects and native plants just prompted me to share one of my favorite statistics, which is that 90% of our insect species require a native plant to complete their life cycle. So for them to survive, they need these native plants. So I just wanted to point that out, that, you know, it's really important that we provide habitat for insects, because all these other species are going to be feeding on them. So healthy yards have healthy bugs.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it's a real mindset change amongst all of us that, who was it, Deb Tommy, or the author, or actually, I think it was one of the leading, what do I want to say, leading professors on biodiversity. But, you know, our yards are we can't afford to just have them be pretty anymore. They really are important ecological sanctuaries. You know, with all this development, there is not enough natural area on our planet anymore. But if you think about everybody seeing their yard as kind of a steward to biodiversity, as well as you know, our water quality, and understanding that we're in these watersheds, that what we do in our yard affects the streams, and you know, it's a real shift, and it's very heartening to see more and more folks seeing their yards that way, and it's really gratifying as you kind of start that journey, I should say. So now, especially given climate change and some of what we've experienced in Portland in recent years, we're going to spend a little time focusing on how to conserve water. And interestingly enough, a lot of the practices strategies that we talk about with managing stormwater, a singular practice like mulch, for instance, like I said, can have 6 or 7 benefits, functions that it's providing you. And so too, you'll see this when we talk about conserving water. Both of these cover pictures are posted there because I've stressed that lawns are kind of the first target to look at if you really want a living landscape, and with a biodiverse and lots of wildlife and habitat. So look to alternatives to the lawn, and here are a couple. This one is still a lawn, but it's called an eco lawn. It's a fleur-de-lawn mix, and those are all little English daisy flowers in there. So it's that's an easy shift to do right there. There are ways to even overseed a lawn with that, but don't do it without reading about it, because you don't want to waste all that good seed. There's ways to make that successful in terms of seeding into an existing lawn. But they have, if you go into the broadleaf plants and mixed in with those grasses, they have deeper roots, which makes them more drought tolerant, and they don't need as much water as just a lawn would. And of course, they're providing habitat as well, and they don't need to be mowed as much either. And so There's just a lot of benefits to going that direction. On the right, this, some of you might have an area on your property that you want to try creating a meadow and let the grasses go longer and let it be quite a mix. And that is just pollinator heaven there. And of course, as a sponge to take all the rain and soak it up, also, it's going to be even better at that as well. I always like to include a few of our natives to see that, we've got a lot of, I just see a lot of beauty in them. My taste has certainly gone that direction over the years, where I look at, I don't know, I look at other big, bright flowers and it's just not my taste anymore. I like the more delicacy of our natives. So on the left, you see a serviceberry, and that is just, I'd say, leafing out now, and will be blooming in a little bit. This photo that I took is on the trail around Oaks Bottom. If you like to take that walk, you can look for these. And they have a really tasty berry for birds after these flowers, and they get a beautiful fall color. But they don't like summer water. And in the center, the red flowering currant especially doesn't like summer water. I've gone through a few cases where I've mistaken, I maybe had it too close to other plants that I watered more, like I was establishing a perennial garden, and I ended up it got root rot from too much water in the summer. So we say it when we mean it. They're adapted to our long dry summers, and a regular water garden does them a disservice for some of them. So we can see the Mahonia, the sort of purplish colored one on the right. That's a low Mahonia. We have, or Oregon grape is the common name. And we have 3 different species of that. And some like shade, some like the sun, some are really tall, some are low. So there's a lot of options with Oregon grape. Next to that is fringe cup. And down below is salal. It's an evergreen. It's in the same family as our blueberries, huckleberries, rhodies are all in a family that loves exactly what we have in our forests, a really rich, high organic, humusy, somewhat acidic soil. So thinking about where are areas where we can, where a lawn just doesn't make sense and we can look to reduce it or get rid of it. So these are some things that come to mind. Slopes. The first house I bought had a slope, like a 1 to 3 slope that was in grass, and it was just terrible to have to mow. So that's a great place to have a whole nice mosaic of different shrubs and ground covers, or even trees, depending on how big a slope you're talking about. And those, and again, with all that variety, you're getting different root depths down into the ground that help hold that slope in place. They might look stable to your eye, but rain has, it can really move soil down slope pretty easily. And you've probably seen this just walking around sidewalks where you next to a slope, where next thing you know, the dirt is over the sidewalk. So if any of you are near a stream, that is certainly a place that you wouldn't want lawn going all the way to the stream, or a good candidate for erosion like you see here. And then there's shady areas. I mean, we have a lot of forests on the west side of the Cascades, and therefore we have just a plethora of shade-loving ground covers and small shrubs that would be under the canopies of our large and medium-sized trees, overstory and understory trees. So bunchberry, if you recognize dogwood, that we have both, we have a dogwood tree, a dogwood shrub, the redwood dogwood, and this is a dogwood ground cover here. It gets little red berries as well. The other place to think about losing some lawn is just where your foot traffic is. It should be a path, not a lawn. Otherwise, you're just, this is what happens. The soil gets compacted and the grasses don't grow very well once they lose or have all that compaction. And then last but not least, it's like we want to allow, how much lawn do we need really for, a little bit is nice, especially if you have a dog or kids or just, it's a nice, what shall I say? I think of it as a mat to a painting to have that restful, kind of solid green to show off all the shrubs, but it could be a ground cover instead. But needless to say, you really want to widen your beds to 10, 12 feet so you can accommodate all these big, wonderful native shrubs. This one that we're looking at is a Ceanothus versiflorus. When it is in bloom, it will just be absolutely buzzing with bees. So these are a few more examples of, this is the Eco Long close-up. You can see these little tiny daisies here mixed in with a microclover. Microclover is great because it fixes nitrogen from the air. So it's also returning nutrients to the lawn, which is a pretty hungry feeder. And the upper right is kinnikinick. Very drought tolerant, but it's evergreen. It has these little bells like you'd see on a blueberry bush and red berries. And you can get that nice massing effect of the green. Maybe you want it in your parking strip, for example. Down below here, we see a couple examples. This is a parking strip that's turned to creeping red thyme. Also very drought tolerant, sun loving. And I was just walking one day and saw someone turn their whole front yard into woolly thyme here, got rid of the grass. So these are not natives, but they certainly are functional in terms of a lawn alternative. And of course, they have the flowering that makes them a better habitat as well. And then lower right is our native strawberry, coastal strawberry. It too is evergreen, gets berries and has the flowers. And just like you would expect, strawberries send out runners. So if you have a sunny area where you want some fast ground cover, this is great for that. And then just another example of a taller grass and flower meadow mix that you could use. So I'm still calling it sheet mulching. I'll have to think of another way to describe it, but it's mulching to remove lawn. And on the photo on the left, you do see that they did place some cardboard beneath, and they're using the arbor chips, and who knows what all else they have in there. But like I say, boy, in the fall, I've actually collected bags of leaves at the street to use for sheet mulching, and I actually collect them now just so that I have something to mix in with my compost in the summer. If I'm mowing grass, which is like your nitrogen source, you need a carbon source, which is the browns, the straw or dried leaves. So I actually keep stashes of these. These are resources, they're not waste. So I make my own compost. And if you don't already know, there is an organization called Chip Drop that, check them out. They will deliver, all of these arborists are working on trees and shipping them up and have big truckloads of it, and you can get them free or with a really little amount of, if you donate $20, you might get faster service. But it really is a convenience for them. And that's why they offer it. And it's a convenience for us if you're trying to, spread mulch over a large area. And now we're finding out that this is even preferable. Science is telling us that this is the preferred. Number one, all the mulch that you buy in our landscape supply places, it's recycling yard debris, and they want to make sure that all weed seeds are killed or any pathogens. So those huge mountains of compost that or bark mulch that they're making is and breaking down is they get very hot. So what you're not getting that you get from bark chips is that it's the raw material and it's still full of microbial life when you're putting this, adding this as a mulch to your yard. So there's some caveats. You have to have a place to dump it. You don't get it exactly, at an exact time, and you're gonna get at least 10 to 15 cubic yards. But I'm on my third truckload, and I always manage to find a place to put it. So that means I have 60 cubic yards of arbor chips in my yard right now. Okay, changing your methods of how you water can make a big difference as to how much water you use. And I just read this in journals that the organically cared for lawns, as compared to the chemically treated ones, requires less water. Can't explain that right now, but that's a fact. And of course, I think we've all sort of know to, if we can, water early in the morning to give, that's when we're going to lose less of that to evapotranspiration, when the day is still cool. But it also, to give your plants that drink of water before the long heat of the day and sun, they're going to be less stressed and more healthy and resilient as well. And for a lawn, you want to provide an inch of water per week. Well, in the summer. And there's these handy little water gauge cups that you could put out in the lawn to sort of measure that. And maybe you're just going to do it 3 times a week, but the total should add up to 1 inch for lawns is what's recommended. But it also, I've read in science, and a lot of us do it, is let that lawn go brown too. And I've read some argument that that's actually healthy for the grass to have that little bit of dormant period and not be pushing and growing all the time, which that the grass is healthier that way. So needless to say, if you do mow, have it be at the tallest setting so you're not cutting too close down to the shaft that's coming up out of the ground. And waiting, a couple, 3 weeks. Well, it all depends on I know that in June or May, that grass is growing really fast, and it might need a mowing a little more often. But finally, if you have an automatic system like this we're looking at here, it's called a low pressure, sort of lower angle stream. So nothing is going big and high up into the air. It's staying close to the ground. And the lower pressure means that less of it is turning into mist and evaporating that way as well. So, if not everybody has an in-ground automated irrigation system run by a controller. But if you do have just a sprinkler, manual sprinkler, look for the ones that are closest to this with a lower pressure and a lower angle close to the ground type of watering. Sometimes and I have a manual one that I might just move it. I'd have what shall I say? I don't try to get as big of an area. I have little areas that I can focus on and then just move the sprinkler around. So I just discovered this today. The Clackamas River water providers, they actually provide rebates on conservation watering tools. So check out their website, and this would be some extra incentive for switching up to these other systems of watering that help conserve water. So that was for the lawn and for our shrub beds and for trees. Here are other ways and it to water that really conserves the water amount of water that you use. And again, we stress more drought tolerant, start with drought tolerant trees, shrubs, perennials, ground covers that don't need as much water. And with these, you're going to water much less frequently, but more deeply to encourage deeper roots, especially for trees. And you can see, I know Friends of Trees has used these, but they're more widely available on the market. It's a watering bag. So like if you know how much water this tree could get, this is a way to measure that. And it drips out the bottom. So all of these slow direct delivery methods that are dripping, they actually go much, much deeper, and down into the root system are more effective. The top watering systems, you could get the mulch wet. And then I've done this before where I've dug down into the dirt thinking I've given it plenty of water, several passes over, and it's still bone dry beneath. And with our summer last year, boy, that was the case. If you weren't regularly watering, it was just bone dry down in the root systems. So here we see a bed that's not all planted up yet. It looks like it, but you can see this is a drip hose with sort of punctures at even, distance. And it's interesting to see too how that water plume sort of spreads downhill with this. And I know when we installed these, the contractor that works with me, she can put a thin layer of mulch above these drip systems, so you're not necessarily staring at them. And she often lays them down after she puts the plants in and can run the hoses really specifically where she wants to around the root zones of the plants. Down below, we see a little close-up of that drip hose. But with those, you can also, instead of dripping straight out of the hose, there's these smaller spaghetti straps that punch in with little special tiny emitters that close to the ground that can water. So you don't need as much hose that way with these little tiny hoses that can go directly where you want them. And then we see a timer here. So you have the ability, once you have this drip system set up, that goes right back to the hose and right at your faucet. And so you can set them for a certain amount of time. You don't need to do as much babysitting, and you don't accidentally put a sprinkler out there that is watering all night, which I think I've had that happen once, or I woke up in the middle of the night. So yeah, timers are good. And then you can also harvest the rainwater for future use. And as you've noticed with these, they're pretty big cisterns, about 5,000 gallons, I believe. Why? Because, we get 8 months of rain and then we have 4 months of dry. So I know when we first saw this water harvesting idea show up, it was with these pretty little barrels, but one of our rainfalls can fill that up and then it's overflowing. And what do you do with that? And you use it once in your garden and then that's it. So you really want a bigger system if you're interested in harvesting the rainwater off your roof. It can collect a half gallon. Well, this is each square foot collects a half gallon of water per 1 inch rainfall. So that means a 1,500 square foot roof can collect for you 950 gallons. You can see how it adds up fast. But I've seen this on my water bill, where they show the use each month, and summer is the outside watering is the lion's share of the water that you use. So whatever you can do to cut down the use, of the water can result in significant savings for you on your water bill. Okay, moving on, we're going to talk about ways to protect water quality. for our streams, our fish habitat, and of course, drinking water, which you saw the map of how many communities the Clackamas River is providing water to. So that's just a even more compelling reason to be very mindful about water quality. And we have some more facts to share. So the following materials that you see on this list on the left have all through research shown that they suppress the salmon's immune system, their nervous system, and they cause olfactory disorientation. So this means, they can't smell, they can't find their way back to their stream of origin. And it also probably suppresses their ability to hunt for food as well. So all of the metals, which are, they're elements, they can't be broken down. So they have a negative impact to our, if they get in the water supply. And so I'm a big advocate of pushing, I see these, everybody well-meaning puts zinc on their roof to kill the moss, and that's just terrible in terms of water quality to do that. Hydrocarbons, are all these are fuels, gasoline, but also tires are showing up to be a big cause of what they're finding in the water that's affecting our salmon. And so I know we can't do much about the roads, but we can, try to gather the runoff from our driveway and make sure that it gets back into the ground where that can be broken down. Cleaning chemicals, detergents, and of course, pesticide, herbicides, fungicides are all showing up in the water. So for water quality too, I mean, those are the chemicals, but sedimentation due to erosion, want to keep that out of our streams, especially for salmon habitat for rearing. Nitrogen, is a fertilizer, but it is, when you use the chemical fertilizers, it does get into our water supply. It adds too much nitrogen, which knocks out the oxygen in the water. And that's when we get our algae blooms that we're seeing here sometimes towards the end of summer. Some of them are very toxic to dogs and people. Prescriptions, if people are flushing their prescriptions down the toilet, that ends up in the water supply as well. And then temperature is a big factor in terms of health of all of our aquatic wildlife. So we want to have nice, healthy stream bottoms for salmon breeding, and we want a really thick, lush streamside vegetation to keep it cool and shaded. And also it provides a lot of the insects that are, that the salmon, they'd be flying around or in the water, that they feed on. So we really encourage folks to part with chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides. These, after all, really came about after World War II. We have 100 years of wisdom of people that gardened and farmed without these, and it was by using a lot of byproducts of organic materials. And so here's another kind of compelling fact list of 30 commonly detected lawn pesticides, and how they show up in our groundwater and leaching into the drinking water sources, toxic to fish and other aquatic organisms. 11 of them are toxic to bees, 16 are toxic to birds. So I was going to say, I don't know if Amy is there listening, but you can take a pledge to restrict your uses of pesticides. Now, all of that being said, certainly in conservation world, with scientists that are trying to restore our natural habitats that are taken over with invasives, there is situations where we must resort to the herbicides. But with all of these, there, there's a lot of, what shall I say? It's a lot of other practices that can be done before we get to that step where we say these are really needed and justified. So when we talk about fertilizers, we just have a plethora of organic nutrient materials, compost, of course, and composted manure, worm castings, comfrey tea, or even a compost tea, where all of these I could elaborate on, but a tea is made, basically it builds all the microbial. If you take a bit of decomposed comfrey, or just even regular compost from your compost heap, and put it in a bucket and aerated it, it really is like what you're doing is you're increasing the population of microbes and nutrients that you can then use to water your plants. And this is, really helpful for, say, little young plants that you're starting to. So look at all of these, they're sort of byproducts. Feather meal, cottonseed meal, blood meal, seaweed, fish emulsion, they're all high in nitrogen. Bone meal in particular, and rock phosphate are high in phosphorus. Potassium, kelp or wood ash is a really high source of that. But what I want to say with these, like you can see on this box of feather meal down below, 12 is nitrogen, and the middle number is phosphorus, and the third number is the potassium. So you see these ratios here. But for a lot of these organic materials, several of them are, they deliver ratios of all three. They're really good all the way around. And even more importantly, they have the micronutrients that have a special purpose. You only need them in a little tiny micro quantities, but they are valuable as well. And you don't always get that with the chemical fertilizers. So seriously, think of starting a compost pile. So, we have to ask, how do you deal with garden pests organically, not with chemicals? And what we say, first of all, it's harkening back to kind of what I said right up front, is prevention. We know this just with our human selves, when we're stressed and run down or eating poorly or not sleeping, that is when we catch the cold or the sickness. So likewise with plants, if you really just build a great, conditions where they thrive, they are naturally resistant to pests, especially natives. The other thing is just changing your mindset about what you see. I think for so many years, people have been trained to think that every bug is bad, and it's just not so. We have a lot of beneficial insects that are predators on the pests. People know that, the ladybug is a popular one. They know that it eats aphids, but there's lots of others that do as well. So when you see like this one example of the lower left with a chewed leaf, that to me would make me happy. That means we've got caterpillars that are feeding the birds that are feeding their babies, giving them lots of protein. The insects are, after all, the foundation of our whole food chain. And so a really diverse living, yard and garden it needs insects. So, is it really a problem is the question to ask here. And then it's always helpful to identify the pest and learn about its habits and life cycle. Like I think about this slug, for instance, we mostly, by the way, if I notice any pests at all, it's going to be in my vegetable garden where I have nice, tender little starts of vegetables. And then somehow the slugs come out and want to find them. Well, a slug is very moist. It needs its habitat. It needs kind of a cool, moist, dark place to reside. And that's why we mostly see them coming out at night to feed on things. So, make sure that you don't unwittingly have perfect slug habitat right next to your vegetable garden where they can go hide out and then crawl out at night and eat your little baby tender vegetables. And there are a lot of ways to trap them. You can see in the center here, that's like a little cottage cheese container with beer set so that it's right at ground level. They're drawn to the beer, and then they drown in it. So yes, you might have to be a little ruthless to do that. So maybe you want other ways. But my point being is, if you understand their habits and life cycle, some other pests, it's like, well, do you get them in the pupa stage, the larva stage, or the adult stage? What's the most effective way to get at them? So we do have, just know that there's lots of hand tools, sprays, traps, barriers that can be used. And you can see this, these two links on your right. And I know that Amy will be posting them to you. They really are wonderful sources for anything that I know that, that any problem that you might have and want to identify and wonder what's the best way to get rid of it. There's just so much that I really want to just direct you to them for other, other effective treatments. The same way the OSU has so much material in it, and an actual hotline that you can call and about anything you may have a question of. So avail yourself to that. And Metro has some great publications too, like instead of toxin, what other ways to address whatever pest you may have. And they also have a booklet that evaluates all of the materials on the market in terms of their toxicity. There's some that are really, really bad and some not so much. And the one rule that I would suggest is, if you're going to buy something on the shelf, if it has the label OMRI on it, Organic Materials Resource Institute, that is going to be a much safer product to use there. And I'll just add, well, no, I won't, because I see we got to keep moving here. But if you're wondering about this little creature here, that is called the lace bug. It's an invasive insect that's come in from China through our ornamental industry. And it sucks, the juices out of the leaf. And it's really, we've seen it, basically it's taking over many of our rhododendrons, especially azaleas. And I've just encountered plants that are so infested that, in that case, the best for me, it's like, just take that out of there. Don't let it spread, and don't end up pouring all of these toxic things and trying to get rid of these bugs. Just get rid of the plant and replace it. So dealing with weeds and diseases, again, the two links that I just mentioned are great sources for that as well. But again, prevention is really key. Keeping that mulch on your planting beds keeps weeds from establishing. Bare exposed soil is just, it's an invitation. So right now, I don't know how many of you are seeing this little weed out there. It's called bitter cress, and these little stringy, it flowers, but it almost seeds at the same time. And there's narrow little pods that they'll be popping open, and those seeds will fly 10, 15 feet. And so always, this is the time of year. It might look like a little tiny plant in the ground, but any of these that I see, I pluck them. And, if you do that and you get to them before they flower and seed, that makes all the difference in the world. You're not fighting the same fight every year if you let them go to seed, and you've got a whole new batch for the next year. And this is true for this one in the middle called Herb Robert. Same thing. It gets these seeds that pop and spread, and it's quite common. It has reddish stems, and it's on our invasive list because of the, some of these meet a threshold of being especially problematic. And the worst invasives are the ones that are actually have moved into our natural areas and are displacing our natives. And this one that I'm pointing to, the upper left, is a wild clematis, and this is when it's in seed. And so these seeds will blow around like dandelion seeds. They grow on vines, and these vines get inside hedges like the laurel hedge or maybe arborvitae. And so it really takes just pulling them out of these hedges, because once they get inside where you can't get to them, they can climb up trees 40 feet in the air. And you'll probably start to spot them as you drive around now. You can see them. And there's several weeds, like especially those that have a tap root. You really want to make sure that you're digging down to get the whole root out. So I see so many people weeding where they're just kind of pulling the top, and that's just not doing it. You need to, and some of these roots they have rhizomes that spread, and so it's no fun, but to really kind of clear a bed of some of these problematic weeds, you just have to bite the bullet and try to get all of the root bits out. And with diseased leaves in the trash or a yard debris bin where they'll be, they'll hopefully be killed by heat. Or if you have a big area at home that you're not mulching, you might just solarize with a piece of hot plastic for a season. It's unsightly, but that kind of does the same job as well. I mentioned invasive species. They are, as I say, they're not, we have all of our sort of annoying weeds and aggressive weeds, but invasive species are, they are actually categorized as that. And they are a real problem. You can see this is along the Clackamas River here, or a tributary of it at least, I would say. And this is Japanese knotweed. So you can see that this one, butterfly bush, is another one where I've seen them, boy, once they get in the stream, where the water is flowing, they can spread really rapidly. And now these become huge, huge projects to remove the invasives. Loose strife is another one that's taken over wetlands. CRISP is here to provide support for removing invasives. It's a partnership, and I don't have all the information on it, but check them out. What do I want to say? Clackamas Soil and Water Conservation District is part of that partnership as well. So if you have something that is a real problem on your property that you don't know that it's invasive, or maybe you do know, they are the source to go to see what kind of support you can get. And that concludes our this seminar or workshop. And we just want to say thank you for joining us, and all of these creatures, thank you for joining us and being a steward and out there with your yards and gardens. And as I say, I think cumulatively, the impact we all can make is mighty and actually necessary for our planet to protect biodiversity, because this is the land that we have to do it with. So thank you. And we'll take some more questions if there are questions.
You must have been just super thorough, because I didn't really see any other questions come through in the chat. But if anyone has questions now, why don't you feel free to please raise your hands using your reactions at the bottom of your screen here. Let us know if you want to say something out loud. That's totally fine. Looks like we did just get a couple. Go ahead.
Sorry. Let's mention the next workshop.
Yes, thank you for reminding me. Yes. So if you had a great time tonight and you feel like a rain garden may be in your future, please join us on May 13th. It's going to be our second session for this workshop at the Clackamas Community College Environmental Learning Center. It'll be the 13th is a Saturday from 9 a.m. to noon. We have a presenter, Amy Whitworth from Planet Earth Design, who will be leading that workshop. I hope to see you all there. And just as a reminder, all the links from the chat today, whether shared by me or shared from others, I will send in a follow-up email along with the recording of today's session to everyone who registered. So look for that, and I'll also include the link to, if you registered for this, you already registered for the other workshop, but I'll just have a reminder in there for that one so that you know when and where to show up. And we did get a couple questions just now. A question from, oh, no, it was a comment from Austin. Always love hate when he learns something he thought was native to be once again another invasive.
Oh, which one was it?
I don't know. Austin, do you want to unmute and say which plant it was?
Now I forget what was the last one there that has the red vines, that you said was a brush that kind of comes in. I had a ton of it on our property that we just redid, and at the time I thought I'd seen it out and about everywhere, and I thought,
It's not a vine. Are you talking about the herb Robert?
if you can go back on your screen a little bit, I could tell you.
Sure.
But as soon as I saw the picture, I was like, oh, that is 100%. Let's see. Yeah, the stuff with the pink flowers there.
Yeah, that is herb Robert.
Yeah. So I had seen that everywhere. I had seen people with it in their yards ornamentally. I mean, so I thought, it just grew next to all of my other wonderful plants out here. And I thought, I'll just leave it. But here we go. So
it takes over pretty quick. And I think it's a little bit allelopathic, like in that it's hard for other plants to grow around it. Is that the right tree? And it's in the geranium family, and it has a really distinct pungent smell when you pull it. That's be really distinctive. And I said that the little, it's not a vine. This is a little, it's more on the ground like this, like the bittercrest that I showed you. Little. It's very low. It's a ground cover. And I know in outdoor school, when they teach the kids this plant, it has a nickname called Stinky Bob. And so teach your kids.
I guess we didn't notice the smell ever, but we had, probably a good 200 square feet of it in a little area. So.
Oh, wow. Yeah, pull that up. And now
it's all gone. We're redoing everything right now. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, well, and the other thing too, when I moved to Portland in 1990, dating myself, but butterfly bushes were really popular amongst folks that wanted to have, create a wildlife garden. And now the Oregon nursery system isn't even allowed to grow and sell them. And I've seen what they've done on like that picture of the knotweed. I've seen that kind of coverage along our streams of with the butterfly bush. And what it should be is those other plants that I showed earlier in the show with the 9-bark and the red twig dogwood, and there's twinberry is another one. And there's, we have so many natives that love that, riparian corridor. So, and they're being displaced by our invasives. And invasives become invasive, so many of them, because they're pretty. The yellow iris is another invasive. They've been brought here from somewhere else where they have unfair advantage.
There was another comment from Mary along those same lines saying, Mary said that she's got some invasive plants in the backyard. What were they? I think it's butterfly bush. Is that what she said? Oh, just invasive plants in the backyard. Should I get rid of them? So in the chat, I said that we would say yes. So I guess, it depends sort of on what the plant is and how invasive it really is, on and I guess up to you on whether you would like to remove them or not. But Susie did share in the chat as well a little bit more about the WeedWise program that the Clackamas Soil Water Conservation District offers to help you identify and remove those weeds if that's the direction that you choose to go.
Mhm. And I think it's all right to suggest that, because I also work with East Multnomah Soil and Water Conservation District. I know that's a mouthful, but it's the Soil and Water Conservation District. And they're offering these similar workshops, one that just focuses on weeds and how to deal with it. So if you check out their website and look at their workshops, you might want to sign up for one yourself. And what was I going to say about, knowing how bad it is? The butterfly bush is really bad. I've just seen it fill in on empty lots wherever a place that is, been kind of altered, and the invasives just seem to zoom in. You'll get everything, the Himalaya blackberry, the deadly nightshade, the wild clematis, it all moves in. Now I know a while ago people really loved their butterfly bush, and at that we say you just have to promise to be religious about deadheading it, cutting the flowers before they can go to seed. If you really can't bear, getting rid of it. But I also want to add that Metro has, amongst all of so many good publications, one of them, it goes through the different invasives and says, what could I plant instead of a butterfly bush? And we might suggest the Douglas spirea, because it's really, similar, very similar in its flower head, or the blue blossom that I showed you, and so, they're recommending alternatives for an invasive that you may have if it's one that you're kind of attached to.
Thanks, Laura. I thought that I saw someone mention butterfly bush in the chat, and I also recommended Douglas spirea in the chat as a possible replacement. Going back to bioswales, Mary has a question. So you lay permeable cloth under the rocks, pebbles, or gravel, is that correct?
Yeah, it's like a membrane. It would be a thick ply, what would you call it? You can see it in rolls in the home improvement stores. It'd be that you could, basically anything that's waterproof, so that, for those first 10 or however many feet you feel comfortable, 10 at the minimum, the water isn't, it's just flowing. The rocks are over the waterproof membrane. What is that? Not vinyl. I'm trying
like
to
a landscaping cloth. This is what
Oh,
Mary has asked.
It's like a thick ply plastic roll thing that you would lay down, and then just, you can cover that with rocks. So when the water is from the downspout, it's just going to flow over that section and until it gets far enough out from the house, and then the rest you have a swell that's just, it's earth, it's earth and rock until it reaches wherever your destination is, if it's a rain garden. So is that clear enough? So you're basically lining the swale with this thick waterproof plastic.
Susie, who works for the Clackamas Soil Water Conservation District, hi Susie, says that she believes that the flow over fabric would be a pond liner.
Well, that would be your heavy duty one for sure. Yeah, or there's that membrane that you use on the top of a green roof. Also, I don't know how heavy duty it needs to be. I mean, it's just resting on the ground and it's got river rock over it, but all of those are good. You just want something that isn't that you're going to worry that it might puncture.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, everyone, any more questions for Laura or for CRBC staff?
Well, we're right at our time, so I guess that's